good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome a licensed attorney, certified private wealth advisor, philanthropist, next generation mentor, writer, connector, and activator, Jennifer Wines. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you. Given all the great work you've done for people in my network, and it's been such a pleasure to get to know you over the past few months.
Yes, thank you so much. So Jennifer, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you please share with us how you started your journey by deciding to go into law school?
That's a great question. So the reason I decided to go to law school was a bit interesting, right? And it requires a little story, which might be helpful. So background is my mom is this fiery redheaded Irish woman, and my dad is this typical, tall, dark, and handsome Mexican man. And they brought me into this world. And so they met in Mexico, where my mom was an exchange student in high school. And ultimately, neither of them went to college in the US in the traditional sense. So my mom ended up taking college courses to get her bachelor's degree and then later on her master's, but she didn't go to college directly from high school. And my dad went to college, but he went to college in Mexico, which is clearly a different ballgame than here in the US. And so that said, my mom and dad didn't have a typical American college experience to refer to and then guide me. And so, I took my SATs without any clue of what was being tested. In fact, I think I went out and to a party the night before. And so that said, it took me some time to find my stride in college. And, but when I did, I wanted more. So that was the catalyst for me deciding to go to law school after graduating college. And, when I got to law school, I fully embraced it, meaning, I did well academically. I ran and won class president and was very much involved in the community. And, on the back end, also, I pioneered the Women's Leadership Initiative after graduating law school in 2010. And that program is still going strong 10 years later. So that's why I went to law school, which was essentially, it took me some time to get the hang of things.
Yes.
And I learned that I love to learn. So
yes. And that's not everybody's cup of tea. So you really have to have a knack for it, and you have to be highly motivated and highly focused, I would imagine.
Yeah, and curious, right?
Yes. Always willing to learn.
Always willing to learn.
So during law school, you also decided to expand into the financial sector. What and how and where did your passion or interest for the financial sector start, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it's not the most obvious jump, right? Or transition.
But that's what makes it so amazing. You've got a phenomenal story.
Yeah, it was quite the pivot. And so I think you'll enjoy this. So I had a couple of experiences that really propelled me into the financial world, if you will. And so the backdrop here is that I've always loved different places and cultures, right? And so I figured out the whole college thing, and I found my stride in law school. I was a bit of a late bloomer. And what I really wanted to do during law school was to study abroad. So I did a legal internship in London at a place called Four Stone Chamber in Lincoln's Inn.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So it was such a great experience for me. And that Four Stone Chamber, they specialize in company law. And so it was during this experience and this internship that I was exposed to the world of finance through two very, dare I say, sexy legal cases, meaning there were massive headlines around each. And so one of which, the first, I was attending pretrial hearings for matters relating to the collapse of Lehman Brothers.
Oh, wow. Gee, that must have been fascinating.
It was so fascinating. A whirlwind, though, because these were all terms and concepts I hadn't heard before, right? So
Yes.
it was quite a learning experience. And the second was attending an appeals court trial, sitting alongside, BBC reporters, basically, and watching this barrister like literally hold court in court, brought by the government. And it was brought by the Office of Fair Trading against 8 banks for excessive overdraft fees.
Wow.
Yeah. And so in this case, for context, it has its own Wikipedia page, and it was just like a huge deal for me.
Mm.
So, I think these two experiences, by virtue of my London internship, is what really opened my eyes to the world of finance, albeit through the legal lens, but, the exposure to finance through these two very, exotic and highly publicized cases is what really piqued my interest.
Geez, that's amazing. So that leads me to the next question, where can you share with us more about passing the Massachusetts bar exam? Because that must have been very interesting and probably quite intense.
It was quite intense. Yeah. So I got back from London, I did another year of law school. And after 3 years of law school, they require a 2-day exam. And so, during law school, I built my confidence. And by the end of it, I was so confident that I approached taking the bar in a very unique way. And, typically everyone takes a prep course.
Yes.
And it's called Barbary here in the US. And so Barbary is a prep course that offers you structure, guidance, and content over the summer leading up to your bar exam.
Yes.
And so upon graduating from law school, the thought of me taking out more loans to pay for this Barbary program,
Yes.
it just seemed ridiculous to me. So in my mind, I had just spent the 3 years preparing for this exam, and I knew I had the determination and the willpower on my own, to structure my days and study on my own. I will say that I was very fortunate because I had a mentor during this process, a gentleman named Professor Jim Janda, and he supported me through the process. He was my advanced legal writing course, so I had already had the experience of partnering with him and working under his guidance. And I owe a huge thanks to him. But ultimately, we created this bar prep experience, ad hoc. And I'm happy to say that I passed the bar, which, as you can imagine, that would be a very gratifying experience for me, given where I started with college and kind of working my way through, if you will. So it's a prime example of one of my favorite sayings, actually, which is, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's called, within structure, we find freedom. So.
Amazing. That's amazing. So when you, just to ask you, because I'm curious now, is what is the, like, when you go into the bar, when you in front of the bar, you go before the bar to obviously pass the exam, is it a practical, like, do you have to do things practically, or is it a written exam, for those who don't know?
Yeah, it's a great question. So here in the US, it's a 2-day exam in Massachusetts. And so 8 hours each. And half of the exam is multiple choice, half of it is essay.
Oh, wow. Okay. Amazing. So what would you say some of your biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career, or have there been a few? Like, what are the most that stand out for you?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'd say that, so the two are, one, relationships are everything.
Yes.
And then 2 is perception is reality. So the first, relationships are everything. And I think you know this better than anyone, just given what you do in your line of work. But, anything productive that occurs comes out of, you know, a respectful, trust-oriented relationship.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter how strong you are within your profession. If your relationships with those around you aren't strong, then nothing really happens, right?
No.
And I'm a firm believer in the fact that business moves at the speed of trust.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Do you find that to be the case for you as well?
No, definitely. And I think it's the foundation for everything, because if your foundation is not strong, in your relationships, then nothing really functions properly.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
Um,
It's the foundation.
so talking about leadership, being a big subject, or lack of leadership at the moment, especially in the current narrative, what would you say makes your leadership style different and unique within what you do?
Yeah, this is also a great question because, to your point, leadership is at the forefront of everyone's mind these days.
Yes.
And one we've all been thinking quite a lot about, including myself. I've been thinking through this a lot. In fact, I'm writing an article on it right now. Um, and I'd like to offer my thoughts on leadership, specifically female leadership versus my own specific leadership style.
Yes, for sure.
And you know, the question of why women aren't in more positions of leadership, right? I think this is a common question that comes up, and rightly so. And like all of us, I've observed lots of interesting dynamics as it relates to leadership, both in law and finance and the workplace generally, and of course the obvious on the global stage. And
Yes.
there's a ton to unpack here, and I'd love to dedicate an hour with you because I would love to hear your thoughts as well, especially as a female entrepreneur. But for the moment, I'll just say that I think that we might be approaching the issue of why women aren't in more positions of leadership, perhaps through the wrong lens.
Yes.
Um, and instead, I think we should be asking ourselves, how do we reimagine and redefine leadership, right?
Yeah.
With consideration for more, you know, in quotes, female characteristics, and how those female characteristics should become part of the definition.
Yes. I
There,
agree.
yeah, right. And then thereby you're expanding the scope and concept of leadership, which would allow for more women to step into roles of leadership. So so that's what I think about leadership at the moment is essentially we have to go back to redefine what it actually is in our current world, in the current state.
Yes, absolutely. So, as a woman in a highly male-dominated industry, how and where did you get your confidence from? And do you have a mentor? And as a strong woman, do you help mentor other women or young girls as a part of a way to help others?
Mm. So the first question about confidence, wow, I mean, I got that as a result of a lot of effort, I
Yes,
think.
because for some people, it's not a natural thing.
Yeah. And I think too, as women, we often feel we need to know everything in order to feel confident,
Yes,
right? And so I put a lot of time and effort into making sure that I knew as much as I could about my profession or industry in order to feel confident. For me, there's no shortcuts. It's
yeah,
just true confidence comes from knowing your stuff. And then as for the mentors, you know, along the way, within the past 10 years of being in the financial world, I've been very fortunate to have, say, four mentors, three of which were men.
yes,
So 75% are men. And the funny thing about mentors is, like, sometimes you only think about them as mentors in retrospect, right?
yes,
And after you've had a chance to reflect back and you think of the wisdom and the guidance that they shared with you, and so this is the case for me with these four individuals that I have in mind. And so I didn't seek out a mentor per se. and I'm a big advocate of mentorship, sometimes coming in a more organic form.
Yes.
Because I've been in a situation, and maybe you have too, when you're paired with someone, right, as mentor and mentee, sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't because it's contrived.
Yes.
And, and you kind of have this cloud of obligation over the dynamic. So I think chemistry is important, in professional relationships, just the same as personal relationships. And
Absolutely. And there has to be synergy. I mean, otherwise it's just a real disconnect.
yes, synergy, absolutely. And so, I will say I do mentor, next gens, if you will, within the Dream Tank community. And Dream Tank is a nonprofit, and their goal is to activate youth entrepreneurship. And so, and as cliche as it sounds, I mean, I get so much out of those interactions. I feel as like it's a mutual mentorship, because it's essentially just the constructive exchange of perspectives with the other person's best interest in mind, right? And these kids are like so brilliant. They're so brilliant.
Yes. Well, also, I guess not only they learning from you, but you're also learning from them, and they're probably also giving you different perspectives on their point of view as well. So I think it probably works both ways.
It absolutely works both ways. Yes. Yeah.
So as COVID-19 has turned our world inside out and upside down, can you share with us how you and the industry that you're in has had to adapt, and can you give us any examples?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely been a year for the book so far, and it's only August.
Yes. Right.
One we will always remember. And and it's a very profound and extraordinary time. And I will say there's so much devastation as a result of what's going on right now. And but the opposite side of the coin here, and that's where I choose to place my energy and focus, is there's so much growth, right, and unity underway.
Yes.
And so I think this is going on a global level, on a local level, and also on an individual level. And so for me, on an individual level, I was in Europe the end of February, beginning of March.
Yeah.
And, the headlines I think hit earlier for you than they did in the US. When did you start, becoming aware of?
Well, actually, at that time, I was in Canada myself, and I must say, Canada really took the lead, and they really took a fast reaction. Just making sure lockdown, it was almost instantaneous, and it was for me, certainly when I was there, I I was talking to people here in the UK, and a lot of them, I mean, the UK went into lockdown probably nearly 3 weeks later than Canada. So I was kind of surprised, but
Mm-hmm.
that was just my experience of when that whole thing started going on.
Yes, good old Canada, where I lived for about 8 or 9 years. It's a fantastic country.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like our experiences were similar, but on a different timeline, because when I was in Europe at the end of February, beginning of March, Europe was much more looped in on the potentials that existed for the virus, right? So
Yeah, big time. Way more, even way more than the UK even.
oh, really?
Yeah.
And so I touched down in New York beginning of March, and people were still, living their lives, going about their business, thinking as though this is something that's happening, in
Over
China.
there.
Yeah, over there, exactly. And then sure enough, within like a week or two, New York specifically started this downward spiral.
Mm.
And it was very unnerving. So I packed my bags, and one suitcase, and I went up to New England for about 3 months, and where I was just immersed in nature and forced to slow down and
Reassess, reevaluate.
exactly
Yeah.
and just to have more kind of space, right,
Yeah.
to be with myself and to think And that's where all this kind of reading and writing and transformation took place in retrospect. I mean, a lot has changed within me in the last 8 months. I mean, I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Yes,
Right?
for sure.
And so, yeah, I've been using this time to spend more energy on meaningful initiatives, right? You start to think about what really matters.
Yeah.
And so what I've been able to crystallize is as to what's important for me is, supporting the distribution of power across genders. So female,
Yes.
male.
Oh, that's so important and
Yeah.
so necessary.
So necessary. So the distribution of power across genders and also generations. So youth, I mean, kids are so smart and come in with such a fresh perspective. So that's a focus for me right now, as well as, exploring the innovation that's happening at the intersection of various industries. Because a lot of our patterns are being disrupted, right?
Big time.
Yeah.
There's huge energetic shift for sure.
Uh-huh. And so that's for me personally. And then, in terms of my industry and the adaptation going on there, I was thrilled to see how quickly a large organization could pivot to remote work, like overnight.
Yes. Well, I guess it also forces people to be innovative, because I think there's times where people, everybody's just going through the motions of, the way things are done. And then suddenly when things shift, it's amazing to see how quickly certain industries or certain people just innovate and can change things pretty fast.
Absolutely. And, and this actually goes back to your question of leadership, right? What did leadership do during this time? And my observation with these large organizations, one of which I'm obviously employed at, has great leadership and great technology that was able to support this pivot overnight, essentially.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, you and I included, right? We're all pivoting and using Zoom instead of in person. And we're all fumbling.
The way in which we do business is totally changed now. And I also think from a real estate perspective, I think that many office spaces are going to end up being converted into residential, because people are no longer going to require or need to work in such huge or overpriced rentals in terms of business.
I agree, and I hope we're right, because that means potentially bigger apartments in New York City, which would be a big win.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, so there's lots of silver linings to what's going on right now. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, do you see yourself pivoting or focusing on new meaningful initiatives as a result of this of this transformational time?
Yes, absolutely, and in big capital letters. And so, the time that I spent in New England, particularly, was quite a catalyst for me, and inspirational for me to lean into my creativity. And my intention is to share myself more fully with the world, I guess, through writing. And so I'm spending much more time on creating content, contributing to conversations, and continually developing my thinking, right, which includes sharing ideas with people like yourself. And I think we ultimately are shaped by what we write, read, and how we speak. And there's a lot of power there. And
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
yeah, and my two areas of focus for writing are exactly what I mentioned earlier. So one is, the distribution of power across genders and generations. And then two, the innovation that's happening that sits at the intersection of industries.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you have a passion for philanthropy, and we're responsible for fostering philanthropic partnerships, which has taken you to Davos in January, which must have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So can you share with us more about this and where your passion for philanthropy came from? And can you share with us more about this experience? So both in Davos and, in general of what you're doing.
Yeah, philanthropy, fantastic. I mean, and philanthropy essentially is taking private resources, right, and pairing them with initiatives for the public good. And the approach that philanthropic initiatives take is that they really focus on addressing the root cause of an issue, right? And they take a more strategic long-term approach. And for me, that's very important. And so my passion for philanthropy, it's a very visceral thing. It comes from this deep inner feeling that if I'm able to amplify and promote efforts for good in the world, then I need to do that. And so, I'm drawn to people and communities that are similarly aligned. And Davos during the World Economic Forum definitely attracts these types of people and creates this type of community.
Yes.
And during this 1 week in January, a lot of beautiful and powerful partnerships are ignited, and a lot remain in full force throughout the year and the years to follow. And there's so many inspiring people, in one little town, essentially in Switzerland.
Yes.
with very big visions. So, it's fantastic to see the philanthropic good that comes as a result of that alchemy that happens there, and to be a part of it and to support that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Davos itself, I mean, did you, in terms of the networking caliber of people that you connected with, I mean, that must have been really fascinating as well.
Very fascinating. Fantastic people, very rich conversation, brilliant ideas, and again, what happens there is some form of alchemy for sure.
So you're also interested in and involved with blockchain technology, which is obviously fascinating and forever expanding. So can you share with us more about this?
Absolutely. So I was first attracted to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies more broadly, given my profession, the world of finance, and a lot of the Bitcoin speak within my social circles. And so I started to explore the genesis of Bitcoin, its history, what it stands for, and how it might play out in our financial system going forward. And it was during this exploration that my interest expanded over to blockchain technology, which is the underlying technology of Bitcoin. And so I've read lots of books. I've done blockchain courses, and I have a lot of, blockchain entrepreneurial friends that I remain connected with, who inform me about what's going on in the industry. And, I also turned to an organization called the Blockchain Research Institute, actually out of Canada. And it's my favorite thought leadership on when it comes to blockchain. And the thing that really fascinates me with blockchain technology is that you can apply it to almost any industry.
Yes.
And so, including for good, right? And philanthropic initiatives. And so a woman who I met in Davos asked me to evaluate and judge blockchain projects for her tech for good startup. And so I jumped on the opportunity, and it was just so fascinating to see the power behind blockchain and how it's applied differently just to make people's lives better.
Yes.
So that's why I continue to stay in the mix. And in my estimation, I think that it has the ability to positively impact nearly every aspect of our economy and society.
Absolutely. And can just for people that don't know, because I do think that there's a lot of confusion as to what blockchain technology actually is. So I know it's a lot more complicated, but if you could just explain to people in the most sort of relatable way as to what blockchain technology actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's essentially, let me think of the best way to explain this here.
Yeah, because I know, I mean, someone's explained it to me, but I think that there's a lot of confusion. It's the same when people try to talk about AI, and then people think it's this, weird thing out there, and
Hmm.
it's not explained very well to people. So,
Right. Yeah, you're right. It is an interesting concept to wrap our head around because it is new,
yes,
Um, and so I think of it as it's an open distributed ledger that records transactions between parties, and
yes,
it's peer to peer. So there's no need for an intermediary, which is the appeal. And so blockchain is used as the undercurrent technology for cryptocurrencies, and specifically um, Bitcoin, to allow for transactions, if you will, between peer to peers, so person
okay,
to person, rather than needing to go through a bank, for example.
yes,
Hmm.
which makes sense.
Hmm.
So that leads me to the final question. What legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered?
Oh.
I know for a lot of people that's quite challenging to answer. It's easier when you talk about someone else, but when you have to talk about, yourself, it becomes a challenge.
It definitely is. And it's one of these things I think we all think about, and it's really hard to crystallize exactly what it is and how we want to be remembered. But I'll say this, and I pose this question to you and everyone who's listening. Is there a time in your life when someone made a huge impact um, on your life? Perhaps they changed the trajectory of things for the better, or they said something to you that really stuck and really helped to influence you to act more positively, or change your perspective on something. Is there someone that sticks out in your mind? It could be like a loved one, a friend, a mentor, a stranger.
Yeah, are you asking me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, definitely my mentor. I mean, I think we going back to the point of you, and, when you spoke about mentoring, I think it's really critical, because I think when it's better to have somebody, in my opinion, from an external perspective, that isn't emotionally necessarily involved. They still have your best interest at heart. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've learned, from my mentor, is having um, somebody there, A, to hold you accountable, but B, to keep you grounded.
Mm,
And I feel like that's, some of the biggest things that I've learned is just remaining grounded, trying not to get emotional about things, and just bringing you back to the point, so to
mhm.
speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like your mentor is like this person for you in your life. And I'm sure you've had others, who have impacted you positively. And I'm sure that you have impacted people positively and have been catalysts for change in their own lives. And so I think this is what makes the world go round. And so for me, I want to be remembered as that person who provided positive change or impact or inspired others
Yes,
on whatever level. It could be a small thing, it could be a big thing, whatever it may be, someone who influenced people's lives for the better, right?
absolutely.
And it's if I had to package it into one little saying, there's this saying that floats around in conversation and on these memes,
Yes.
and it's something along the lines of, be the person you needed when you were younger.
Yes, true.
And that's what I'm always striving to be for those around me.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time. It's been amazing having you on the show, and hopefully we can have you back in the future. If people would like to connect with you, what would be the best platform to do so? And obviously with good intention.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been such a pleasure. So much fun. A good way to start my morning here in New York.
Yes.
And yeah, I'd welcome anyone who's interested to connect. To find me on LinkedIn is the best platform, if you will. And I'm looking forward to connecting with whomever is interested in connecting.
Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are in your journey. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and for your very thoughtful questions.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.